sit still, so having me standing in place behind a podium is just not going to work. My friend Sandra Purcell once told me every year you should try to do something that scares you. Talking about my family and my background, check mark for this year. My father, as most people know, my father's family came from Washington State. They've been here since statehood. My mother's family comes from Minnesota. And although she and her brother, there were only 2 children, my grandmother was the youngest of 15. By the time I came onto the scene, there were 9 of them left. And I was basically the favorite nephew. I never tired of their stories, and they sort of adopted me as one of their own, and I felt very close to them. The oldest of that family was born in 1897. My grandmother was born in 1915. When I went to school in Los Angeles, where I grew up, I generally was educated far away from where I lived. So I really didn't have too many close friends. I had my members of my family, and those are the people I felt closest to. They're only a phone call away, although phone calls a long distance back at the time was a little bit scarce. So generally our conversations was by written medium, and I do remember as a child sitting next to the built-in mailbox at my grandmother's house, eagerly awaiting for the next wild missive from my aunts and my uncles. And just as a side, you notice how people just don't seem to understand what patience is anymore. Maybe it's because everything is in such instant time. You send an email, you get a response back. There's nothing where you have to wait 3 days for the post carrier to bring something to you. I think that's something that we've kind of lost, that's lost in this current generation, and I hope one day that someone will understand the value of waiting for something special. Of the 9 aunts and uncles that I had, I was closest to my Aunt Lena. She is the one in blue. The picture next to that is her husband, Jim, who had to be one of the best uncles ever. He was the one who had all the great stories. He was funny, he was witty, he was kind, and he was totally amusing. And for a young kid growing up, I cannot say that anyone could do any better than that. Lena used to say that she was my best friend, and she was right. A lot of the strange little quirks that people have noticed about me, I probably have inherited from her. The ones that, for folks who know me well enough, is that I have a lot of love for antiques, and if you go to my office, it looks more like a museum than an office. But oddly enough, people feel comfortable there, so we get a lot of stuff done there. The other thing about her that I picked up was politics. Most of my grandmother's family were all DFL, Democrat Farmer Labor. She was the only Republican. So with that, I will share with you 6 real quick comments from her. Things that I learned. The first is individuality. She took a lot of grief for being the lone Republican in the family, and after that generation passed on, I was pretty much the lone Democrat. So I took a lot of grief there too. Being one of 2 Democrats on a county council of 7, I take a lot of grief a lot of times. But you know something? I'm comfortable with who I am, and that goes a long way towards trying to get things done. Second thing is, she always urged me, you got to know yourself. There's nothing more dangerous than to someone to get involved in public service. They really don't have any idea who they are. Because what happens is they get in a position of power, and the people are going to tell them who they are. And that makes it very dangerous. There's nothing worse than someone who really has no inner core, because they can be led anywhere. Third thing she imparted on me is that when you make a decision, you have to be able to look in the mirror and appreciate what you did. And when it all comes down to it, you know, I try to do as best as I can for folks in Pierce County, but I have to be able to accept the decisions I make. Because if I don't, then I'm going to regret them. And if I regret them, then I'm going to make more mistakes. Fourth comment from her was that you need to let it go. And Claire Petrich has always been able to remind me of that. She just kind of like, you know, you got to get zen with it. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that from her when she speaks later. There is something to be said for when you're up there and you're fighting for something and you know you're going to lose, you just got to let it go. You do what you can. You do the best that you can. And you just got to accept that's what life is. Fifth comment for her was you need to be observant. A lot of times when I am working with my colleagues, they'll be saying something, but I know they're thinking something else, and a lot of it has to do with body language. I mean, the ability to look at someone and see what and understand what they're thinking just by how they're presenting themselves is kind of a lost art unless you play a lot of poker. Well, politics is like poker. I'm not a good poker player, not really good at the card game itself, but I can pretty much well tell you where people are coming from, and I gotta tell you, it's a very valuable thing. It's something I learned from her. And the final thing I'm actually gonna leave you with is there's a benefit to being curious. Ask questions. Try to understand where people are coming from. And in the long run, that probably gets you to a better solution than anything else. Now, I will wrap this up because I did promise Dayton that I would tell people what the coat was about. So in the center, up to the side, you will notice two gentlemen in coats from World War I. Those are my uncles. And they were the favorites of my aunt. And she always used to rave on how they had these wonderful coats that were just so warm and just so welcoming. And I was able, fortunately, not too long ago, to pick up one for myself. Yes, it looks a little outdated being 100 years old, but I gotta tell you, at 10 pounds, in the middle of winter, when everyone is walking by me freezing and looking at me saying, wow, what's with the weird coat? I'm warm, and you're not. For those of you who don't know, my name is Tim Farrell. Thank you.